You're listening to a 3CR podcast created in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
Public transport's great.
What's not great is that unless you've got a radio with you, you can't listen to 3CR when you're on it.
Until now. The Community Radio Plus app lets you listen to us wherever you are.
Get on board and search Community Radio Plus wherever you get your apps.
Time's on my mind when I had you by my side. Am I thinking loud? Do I want you around? Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction. In the fields of bodies burning, as the war machine keeps turning, death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed mind.
Welcome to the Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia on the National Community Radio Satellite. Listen to the Anarchist World This Week, Australia's sacred cow slaughterhouse. Listen to analysis of local, national, international events. Listen to analysis you'll never hear anywhere else.
Welcome to the Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia by the Community Radio Network. My name's Joseph Toscano. This program is coming to you from the studios of 3CR in Melbourne. And if you've got any complaints, give us a ring, 0439 395 489, and I'll set you straight. Okay, you wonder what anarchy is all about? Anarchos without rulers. It's about creating a society without rulers, not without rules. What gives individuals and small groups the ability to determine the lives of billions of people, not just hundreds of millions, but billions of people, as we see around the world, inequalities in power and wealth. The anarchist struggle is a universal struggle. It's the struggle to devolve or share power, and it's the struggle to hold wealth in common and use it for the common good. That's what the anarchist struggle is about. And whether you call yourself an anarchist or not, if you're involved in the struggle to create a society that provides the greatest good for the greatest number, well, I'm afraid you've got the mark of Cain on your back. You are an anarchist. All right, let's move on. Now, as I speak, the merchants of death are being feted in the Melbourne CBD. Isn't it wonderful that the merchants of death who make a buck of an expanding industry, armaments industry in the country in Australia, have come together for the Knees Up Mother Brown Convention to discuss the latest ways you can kill things, including people, obviously. And it's quite extraordinary, one, that they would have the audacity to hold their little festival at the Melbourne Convention Centre, and that nobody in government, especially at the local and state level, had anything to say about it. They're quite happy for the merchants of death to ply their trade in the midst of the Melbourne CBD. Now, obviously, they have a bit of understanding. See, we've got hundreds, if not thousands, of Victoria police wasting their time trying to prevent a few thousand demonstrators from causing a little bit of a ruckus. We have police horses which are put, could you imagine 2024 and they still use police horses? Isn't that animal cruelty to actually put horses in such a situation? You'd think that our Animal Justice Party would have something to say about that. And then we've got the waste of millions of dollars. Now, if the merchants of death are such a profitable little group, and I'm sure they're profitable, being able to hire the Melbourne Convention Centre and bring a tank in, you would think that they would be responsible for providing the money to pay for security for their little shindig, their little festival of death. But no, the Victorian taxpayer will be forking out the bill to ensure that this festival of death goes on ad nauseum. Now, we are told we live in a deteriorating world situation. And of course we do, for a variety of reasons. And one of the major reasons, as I said at the beginning of this little chat, was inequalities in power and wealth. And that's what this is about. It's about ensuring that the state has a monopoly on the use of force in order to protect the status quo. Whether it's the police force at a state level in order to protect the merchants of death, or whether it's the state at a federal level being involved in military adventures overseas to promote the interests of its little ally, the United States of America. What an audacity. What audacity. You know, over the next few days, the merchants of death will be discussing the little things, little bombs you can make that whiz around and are programmed to little marbles that are programmed, say, to enter anybody that's under 25, every 25-year-old male in a particular area, and then you blow them up. You'd be amazed at the sophistication of the weapons of death that are being used. I mean, we see it in the Ukraine. We see it in Gaza. Extraordinary situation. How is flesh, human flesh, blood and flesh and bone, meant to survive against this onslaught? And we're told that this is a great export earner for Australia. And this is what this is about. This festival, which has been organised by the merchants of death, is to create ever-increasing profits for a military-industrial complex that wants increasing friction, that relies on war, that relies on destruction, indiscriminate destruction, in order to increase their profits. I can assure you, of all the delegates at the Merchants of Death Festival at the Melbourne Convention Centre, which is going on as I speak, I can assure you that most of them, if not 99.9%, are there to see how the people they represent, whether it's the scientists who design these weapons of destruction, whether it's the manufacturers, whether it's the salespeople, whatever, they're there to make a buck. That's what it's all about. It's a festival to make a buck, creating weapons which are designed, in the majority of cases, not to be used in confrontation between nation states, but weapons which are designed to be used against people, ordinary people, trying somehow to improve their situation in society. This is not a merchant of death festival about protecting you and me from the nasty Russians and the nasty Chinese and the nasty Martians. This is a festival to promote and expand a market which is designed basically to control people. That's what it's about. Now, I know everybody's worried about Gaza, and I can understand that. And obviously there's a heavy pro-Palestinian presence in the protest movement. But let's not forget little old West Papua, 70 kilometres from the coast of Australia. For decades we have been training Indonesian military personnel in counter, in inverted commas, insurgency techniques to eliminate any resistance to the Indonesian occupation of West Papua. And 1 million bodies later, you will see that many of the participants in the Merchants of Death festival will be Indonesian military people who have come there to find the latest and best equipment to ensure that the West Papuan independence movement, an independence movement which has lost over 1 million people, and when I say lost, has over 1 million people murdered by Indonesian authorities in their struggle for national independence. So how many more years of this travesty are we going to support? Now, I know Australians, you see, I think the Victoria Police have grossly overreacted. They expected hundreds of thousands of people to be there in the next few days. Well, hopefully there will be hundreds of thousands, but I doubt it very much. See, we're more interested in the AFL final series. We're happy to part with hundreds of dollars to get a ticket to watch some people kick a football over the place. And then, there's all these concerts, all these celebrities, who make us feel better. And we're willing to spend hundreds of dollars going to see them. So, think about it. Do you really approve of this happening in the centre of our city? If they want a festival of death, why don't they have it at some military base? I mean, Puckapunyal's less than 90 kilometres from the Melbourne CBD. They've got to got the Australian armed forces to protect them and gone about their little business. But the thing is, you see, this is where it's really evil. It's really evil because this festival of death, which has been promoted by the Merchants of Death, is designed to get private enterprise, that's right, to get private enterprise to provide resources to allow the development and manufacture of weapons of death. This is a festival. This is a trade festival specifically designed to draw in non-state actors into the little game. That's what this is about. It's not about the defence of this country. It's not about ensuring that we have the technical expertise to defend Australia in case of some invasion. It's about maximising profits for private and state enterprise. You listen to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. This program is streaming live on 3cr.org.au. It is broadcast across Australia, I've said before, north to south, east to west, every state and every territory. Now, obviously, it's unbelievable, really. Now, I'm going to try to weave together some things that are connected with the Merchants of Death and their Festival of Death. Now, we've just had a Royal Commission hand down a report on veteran suicide, which has taken 3 years to compile. I know we've had 47 investigations to veteran suicide over the last 20 to 30 years, and the dial hasn't moved in any direction. And I know that 1,600 veterans between 1991 and 2023 have taken their own lives, and that's a minimum amount, because some veterans who've taken their own lives may have taken their lives in so-called accidents. Because the thing is that if you kill yourself and you've got an insurance policy, your family gets nothing. But, you know, if it looks like an accident, well, at least they get an insurance payout. And people think of those things. But the thing is, what's it about? Why are so many people who are involved in a military service find themselves in such a difficult situation? Not just those who commit suicide, but those with post-traumatic stress disorder and all the issues which, you know, accompany military service. Now, when you look at the advertisements on social media and, you know, the legacy media regarding joining the armed forces in this country, it's all very pleasant, you know. Men and women, be what you want to be. Join the Australian military. They never tell us eventually about, you know, killing people or doing things you don't want to do. See, human beings were not created, in inverted commas, to indiscriminately slaughter each other. Now, obviously, in terms of conflict, if somebody attacks you, well, then you defend yourself, or you try to defend yourself. This is a normal human reaction. But what being part of the military is about stripping somebody down to their basic essentials and then building them up into a machine that follows orders. Because military service, whether it's in the armed forces, the Air Force, you know, wherever, it's about following orders without questioning those orders. That's what it's about. And to create that type of person, you need to dehumanise them first and then build them up into what you would like them to be. Now, a lot of people who have been involved in military service will tell you, who've been involved in direct combat, will say to you, it's not the issue that's important. It's not the fact that the government has sent me to do this. What is important is who's got my back in that particular situation. Because if you are in the front line, whether you survive or not is totally dependent on the people around you. And although we've seen a number of accusations and allegations being made regarding Australian military service personnel's conduct in areas of war, what the extraordinary thing is, at the end of the day, it's not the commanding officers who find them in war, who find them in, who are responsible, and it's not the political leadership that has made the decision to send people to war, to sacrifice people in order to enhance an alliance with the United States. They never get their hands dirty. But those who are sent to do the dirty work, they're the people who find themselves paying the price. And it's not just the price of dying in battle. It's the price of having to deal with the moral panic which becomes part and parcel of the life of many people who've been inducted into the armed forces, through fancy advertising or whatever, who begin to understand that what they have been asked to do by the government of the day, by their officers, has moral implications for them and their families. Because for every member of the armed services who's committed suicide in this country in the last 30 years, for every member of the armed services who's been discharged with post-traumatic stress disorder, it's not just the effect it has on that individual, but the effect it has on their families, their partners, their children, their friends, and the intergenerational effect it has. You speak to any Vietnam veteran, whether they were conscripted or not conscripted, and you will find the ramifications of what they were asked to do continue to reverberate decades later, not only in their personal life, but the lives of the people most dear to them. So it's not about humanising military service. It's about creating an armed force whose primary role is to defend the country from invasion. It's not about creating an armed forces which is used to promote particular ideological concerns of so-called allies. And that's what we've created. So many people who've been involved in these outside adventures, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it was Vietnam, whether it's Iraq, whether it was East Timor, when they come home, they ask themselves, what was all that about? Why have we been pushed aside? Why doesn't anybody listen? Why aren't the support services there that's supposed to be there? And that's what the Royal Commission, to a significant degree, has highlighted. Whether anything happens really is dependent on the officer classes in the armed service in this country actually being held accountable, and the politicians who make the decisions to send people into these wars that have nothing to do with us, the consequences to them. Now, I remember one very important little quote, and I'm sure you'll all remember this, those who are old enough. Muhammad Ali, when he went to jail for refusing to be drafted in the United States military, he said, "No Viet Cong has ever done me any harm. So why should I go out there and kill Viet Cong?" Think about it. Now let's just take it a step further. Let's take it a step further and let's move to Gaza. The carnage continues. Now, 7 hostages were executed by Hamas about a week ago. That's murder. Plain, simple murder. Irrespective of your political position, that is murder in anybody's, book. But when the Israeli Air Force bombs tents looking for militants and 30, 40, 50, 100 people die, it's called collateral damage. It's the price that needs to be paid in order to eliminate the enemy. It's collateral damage. So why is it that we pussyfoot around this terminology? Murder is murder. Whether you shoot somebody in the back of the head or you use a plane to bomb civilians, irrespective of whether there are militants among them, is murder. And for far too long in the Australian media, we have refused to use the word murder as far as Gaza is concerned and as far as Ukraine is concerned. For far too long, we've refused to use the word murder. It's about defence. It's about revenge. But it's never about murder. When you have 13,000 children die as a direct result of military action by the Israeli Defence Forces, these are children under 12, you know. Collateral damage. It's collateral damage. When a protester in the West Bank is shot in the head, it's collateral damage. When an Australian aid worker is bombed to bits, as well as her friends are bombed to bits, it's collateral damage. I mean, words are powerful things. That's why, you know, I'm here, broadcaster in the anarchist world this week. Words are powerful. And how we use words can, to a significant degree, make us immune from the horrors and tragedies which unfold before us. Whether it's the merchants of death's little, you know, knees up Mother Brown soiree in the Melbourne, you know, CBD, or whether it's the carnage in Gaza, it's important we use words that actually reflect what is happening. Murder is murder. Whether it's conducted under the auspices of a nation state or an ideology, murder is murder. Simple. Obviously, the people who are killed, who use the word killed by Hamas when it, for whatever reasons, when it broke out of Gaza, were murdered. The hostages were murdered. But the bulk of the 40,000 Gazans that have died and the over 1,000 people that have now died in the West Bank, that's also murder. So we should use words that are powerful to denote situations. A lot of people use the word genocide. Now, most people aren't familiar with the word genocide, but they are familiar with the word murder. They are familiar with how they feel about their children and grandchildren. So it's important that we humanise language in terms of describing what's happening. Now, people call this convention in Melbourne, you know, land something, I don't know, whatever it's called. I don't give a shit. But it's not that. It's the merchants of death who have come together to make a buck. That's the only reason they've come together. They've come together to share their ideas to, you know, make a bigger buck. So these are merchants of death. These are the people that produce the weapons which allow people to be murdered. And we're told they're doing it for us. They're doing it to protect Australians. Now, I've heard this garbage now for the last 73 years I've been on this planet. You know, they're doing it for us. They're not doing it for us. They're doing it to protect a system of government and an economic system which is based on the concept of private investment for private profit. So it's important when we discuss things that we use words that actually denote what's happening. Listen to The Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia by the Community Radio Network. This program is streaming live on 3CR.org.au. The program is podcast. You can access the podcast, as I said before, by going to 3cr.org.au. Isn't it funny? We're going to ban children from social media. Well, fair enough, do what you like. But isn't it funny that we don't actually feel the same compulsion as a nation to eradicate childhood poverty? I remember when the late Mr. Robert Hawke said there'd be no child living in poverty by 1990 or whatever it was. They all laughed. People laughed. They said, ha, 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 ha. Well, in 2024, there are still millions of children in this country living in poverty. We hear stories every day of charities providing food for people who can't get enough food in this country. We hear stories every day of people having trouble meeting their basic necessities, keeping a roof over their head. We have, stories every day telling us about how difficult it is to get a good public education. I mean, we hear it every day. But, let's ban social media. I should say asocial media. Particularly nasty form of communication. And it's nasty for one very good reason. It's based on a private investment for private profit mantra. Why do you think there is so much shit on social media? Or asocial media, you like to call it? Simple. The more eyeballs you draw to a platform, by more outrageous behaviour, the more advertising, the more money for the people who own that particular virtual platform. It's the same thing as the Merchants of Deaf, festival in the Melbourne CBD. Same thing. It's about making a buck out of people. So maybe, instead of passing legislation to put in place laws that may or may not be effective to ban children, I think 14 and under, from accessing sections of social media, maybe it would have been a little bit more, maybe we passed legislation to ensure that no child lives in poverty and do something about it. Think about it. That's why you listen to the Anarchist World this week. I mean, look, I've been on the planet a long time. The thing is, broadcasting on radio, and I've been doing it for a long time now, almost 50 years, it's about planting a fort for tomorrow. It's a little bit like planting a tree as you get older. When you get older, you plant a tree. You're not planting the tree because you're going to see it grow. You plant a tree in order to assist the community or to provide something pleasant for your descendants to look at. Right? That's why you plant the tree. Not because you are going to get any reward for it, but because future generations may get a reward for it. And that's what broadcasting is about. It's about planting a fort for tomorrow. Because you see, all social movements, all political movements come from planting forts in people. And the Anarchist World this week is about planting forts in people in terms of looking at things in a different way. Because we're constantly told every minute of every day of our lives there is only one way forward, and that is through a private investment for private profit strategy which creates ever-increasing profits for a minority. Now, if this system was such a wonderful system, why is there so much discord, but more importantly, distress and anxiety in Australia? I mean, many people have access to technological innovations which didn't exist even a decade ago. But it has actually improved anything. And the fact is, this banning children from social media is about trying to address the anxiety and harm it is doing to a whole generation after generation of children, now 2 generations. So is the way forward to acquire more and more goods and services? Because if that's the way forward, why do we have so many people in so much distress? And I was very pleased to see that when people talked about the 9 people who successfully commit suicide every day in this country, that's not just about mental health issues. It's about what drives people to take such actions. And obviously hopelessness is a significant contributor, but not just hopelessness in terms of, existential angst, but hopelessness related to the economic and financial situation you find yourself in. I mean, life isn't a 100-metre race where everybody starts at the same level. If you watch a 100-metre race or a 200-metre race, everybody starts at the same starting line. You see, life in this country has become a handicap race. I mean, of all the sovereign nation states on planet Earth, in the history of humanity on planet Earth, we should be one of the happiest and productive societies on the planet. We should. We have everything in our favour. We have a large landmass, a small population, massive amounts of resources, no food shortages, except if you're poor, but that's a different story. That's not a matter of production, it's a matter of access because of financial constraints. But why are we the second most heavily medicated sovereign nation state on Earth for depressive and anxiety? Why do we have all these massive, both voluntary and non-voluntary associations and organisations which have sprung up to deal with issues which should have been dealt with decades ago? See, the problem is they expect you and me to be perfect people. We've got laws and legislation to ensure we are perfect people. Walk into any shop or big shop or whatever, and it says, any bank, please respect our staff. Do not get annoyed. Please respect our staff. You see what's happening? Staff at the front line have now become the meat in the sandwich. You've got corporations which have taken over most of the necessities, that we require, right? They have staff who provide services, and then we have customers. That's idiots like you and me, all right? Well, we're all customers in one way or another. And the thing is, whether it's a state government or the federal government or a private corporation, what is happening to increase profits for shareholders, and that's the key, increasing profits for shareholders, you squeeze the amount of staff available. And they expect us to take it every day. So you wait 2 hours on a phone and then you're fobbed off or it rings out. Or you're forced to serve yourself without getting a discount in a major supermarket. And I think we're perfect people. There are no perfect people in an imperfect world. We live in an imperfect world, and none of us are perfect. I'm sure every single person listening to this program, including myself, would be, we regret many of our actions. We regret what we've done in the past. But we're not just isolated individuals who've got imperfections. We are part of society. And how that society is structured, both economically and socially and ideologically, is what determines what type of people we eventually become. For example, obesity is the issue of the day, all right? Obesity is the issue of the day. Now, why are people obese? Well, we don't walk as much, we don't do physical work, but one of the major issues that revolve around obesity is the type of food production industries we have. In the good old days, in inverted commas, the rich were fat and the poor were thin because they didn't get enough calories, right? In 2024, the poor are fat and the rich are thin because they can afford fresh food, they can afford personal trainers, they can afford to take time out to look after themselves. So obesity isn't just an individual problem. It's a society-based issue. And unless we tackle things like sugar, in soft drinks, the amount of salt and garbage in processed foods, well, then obesity is always going to be a problem. And the ones at the front line will be children who are seduced by advertising, which is there not to promote a healthy lifestyle, but to create a market for a product which will increase profitability for shareholders of a particular corporation. It's very simple. And when we have governments which allow this to continue ad nauseum, obviously there are problems in the community. Look at the anxiety levels amongst young people. Now, if I was young today, I would be bloody anxious too. If you do the right thing and get some type of degree, you got a HECS debt. So you start off your working life on a HECS debt. Then you look for a job, right? You haven't got much experience. You look for a job. You finally find a job, but it's on a short-term contract. And then when you're on a short-term contract, you're always on edge. There's no permanency. None whatsoever. None in the universities. None in most corporations. You sign a contract. And why do you sign a contract? Because unions have been legislated out of existence in most industries. Therefore, you go up capping hands and say, oh, yeah, Mr. Boss. Yeah, Mrs. Boss. Yeah, I'll do anything. I need a job. Well, you can have a 6-month contract, and after 6 months, if you behave yourself, we may extend your contract for another 6 months. I mean, wouldn't that create anxiety? Then you go on social media and you get all this shit. Why? Because people need to make a buck. They want to make a buck at our expense. So instead of looking at piecemeal solutions which are based on the principle that perfect people exist in a vacuum, why don't we look at the type of society we've created, where there's no future for so many generations? As I said, planting a fort. You know, one way to solve all these issues, universal basic income. We talk about artificial intelligence, the robot age. Remember the good old days and everybody had a job? In inverted commas when I talk about, it's really pathetic when you talk about when the bad old days have now become the good old days, but that's what happens as you get older. I'm making fun of myself there, which I deserve, because there's no such thing as the good old days. It's always been bad old days. But the thing is, things are getting worse. So getting back, what's a simple way to resolve this issue? Universal basic income. We are a rich nation. We have extraordinary resources. But the resources have been put in the hands of a minority, and we get a little bit of few jobs, about 2%, and we get, a bit of money in taxation and maybe some royalties. The fact is, if these resources were controlled by us, the people, right? Us, they were nationalised, you could have a universal basic income, and then people could make up their minds, do I really want to work? The whole nature of work would change, because not everybody has to work in order for society to survive. That's the beauty of mechanisation. But today, mechanisation is not about reducing work and improving your situation. Mechanisation is about increasing profitability for a shrinking minority. And if you think I'm bullshitting, well, look at the facts and figures. Won't take long. You can go on social media, can't you? Look at the facts and figures. You listen to The Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia from the city which is hosting the Merchants of Death in the Melbourne CBD. Wonderful, wonderful world. Apologies to poor old Louis Armstrong. Now, I'd just like to remind people, Eureka celebrations, 3rd of December, 2024, 170th anniversary celebration. Why is Eureka important? Eureka is important because it was based on 4 principles: solidarity, internationalism, direct action, and direct democracy. They were the 4 underlying principles of the Eureka Rebellion. And this year, the Reclaim the Radical Spirit of the Eureka Rebellion group, which is part of the Anarchist Media Institute, and Ballarat Trades Hall have teamed together to present you this year's edition of the 170th anniversary of the Eureka celebration. So take Tuesday the 3rd of December off. Come and join us in Ballarat. Starts at 4 a.m, finishes at 10 p.m. Long day, great day. Meet like-minded people. And while I'm talking about that, I think I mentioned a week or so ago that Eureka Australia Medal nominations are now open. Now, I know you love reading, the Invasion Day honours list and the King Charlie's honours list, all right? It's funny, isn't it? What a funny situation we have in this country, where people who receive honours from the state, you either receive it on Invasion Day or you receive it on King Charlie's birthday. How pathetic. So, in 2005, we began the Eureka Australia Day medals, and these are given to extraordinary people who've been at the cutting edge of the struggle to create change, create egalitarian change, who have made a difference, who are not recognised by this country's institutions because they're considered to be rebels or troublemakers, because they have initiated campaigns which have brought about change. We've had some extraordinary recipients over the last 20 years or so, 19 years. Now, there are 6 Eureka Australia medals which will be presented at Bakery Hill. That's the little section of Ballarat which is left after the much maligned Builders Labourers Federation put a green ban on Bakery Hill, which is the site of the monster meetings, which are responsible for the Eureka Rebellion. And we're presenting 6 of these medals, but it's an open nomination process. If you know somebody who you think should be honoured in such a way, who's made that contribution, I encourage you to either leave a message on 0439 395 489. You can write a little epistle and send it to Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052, or you can email it to info@anarchistmedia.org, info@anarchistmedia.org. The thing is, there are people out there who've done the hard yards, they've made a difference, they've changed society, and the only reward they've had is criticism from the very people who were forced to make that change. And when that change was made, guess who claimed the credit? Not the people who awarded a Eureka Australia medal, but the authorities who initially resisted that change. Now, there are people out there who they don't have to be big names, not interested in big names. You can send us big names, but we'll ignore it. We're interested in people who've done the grassroots work, who've put in the hours, the days, the years, pushing for a particular outcome to improve humanity's situation. There are many people out there who will never be recognised, who need to be recognised. So if you know somebody, please let us know. Now, you're listening to The Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia of other community radio network. As I said before, community radio is about planting a fort for tomorrow. And this week's fort, universal basic income. Think of the good it could do. Think of how it could liberate us from wage slavery. Think about how it could liberate us from childhood poverty. Think about how it could ensure that we control our own resources as a nation. You've been listening to The Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. This program has been streaming live on 3cr.org.au. The program is podcast. Yes, believe it or not, it is podcast. Hundreds, if not thousands, of programs there you can listen to. But the thing is, there's no point listening. It's a little bit like looking, No point looking, no point listening. It's time to act. So if you are in Melbourne in the next few days and you want to enjoy yourself, go down to the Merchants of Deaf Festival in Melbourne Convention Centre and have a chat to the nice police there who are protecting the Merchants of Deaf. So, also, don't forget tonight, if you are in Melbourne, come to dinner, 6:30pm, Alicia, Corner of Hope, Sydney Road, London. Let's go. Here we are. The Anarchist World This Week is
Welcome to The Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia on the national...
All right. Well, my perfect producer has been perfect. Look, as I said before, it's about planting a fort for tomorrow. That's what The Anarchist World This Week is about. It's also about encouraging you to get off social media, get out of your house, meet like-minded people, work with like-minded people, be part of a community that wants to change things for the better. It's about a community which is trying to create a situation or create a situation, said before, a situation where we're trying to make the greatest good for the greatest number. It's a simple concept. It's what democracy should be about, but is not about. It's about creating the greatest good for the greatest number. And if you're involved in that struggle, it doesn't matter where it's about, you trying to get up, a crossing, crossing lights where somebody's been killed, or you're trying to change the world. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is that you become involved in those struggles, not just on a virtual platform, not just by speaking to your friends and family, but by planting thoughts in people's mind that can be used for tomorrow. And remember, in order to understand the present, you need to understand the past. If you want to change the present, you need to understand the past. And if you don't understand the past, you'll never change the present. Now, a few YouTube channels: Public Interest Before Corporate Interests, josephtoscano.com. You can join Public Interest Before Corporate Interests, info@pipsy.net. Thank you once again for listening to The Anarchist World this week on your local community radio station.
Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction.
An analysis you'll never hear anywhere else. Anarchist World this week. Australia's sacred cow slaughterhouse. 10 a.m. every Wednesday. Listen to The Anarchist World this week for an up-to-date analysis of local, national and international events.
Poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord, yeah.
CR is about community, and we welcome your participation at the station.
3CR is open to a wide diversity of volunteers and is a great way to connect with Melbourne's activist community.
Have you ever thought about volunteering, doing a reception shift, getting a program on air?
Training in radio skills or contributing to one of the station's committees.
There are many ways to be involved at 3CR.
To find out more, go to 3cr.org.au and get in touch.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.